Welcome to the Forever Cash Life Real Estate Investing Podcast with your hosts, Jack and Michelle Bosch. Together, let's uncover the secrets to building true wealth through real estate and living a purpose-driven life.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Winning Wednesday. I'm super excited to be here and welcome to another great session here. Today we're going to talk about how to do your own title searches for liens, right? How to do your own title searches for liens. This is an important factor if and when you decide to do deals without actually using a title company. So I think in last week we talked about three different kind of deals. The last Winning Wednesday session that we do in our Facebook group, the Land Profit Generator Real Estate Investing Group. So if you're watching this on a podcast, make sure that you actually come over to Facebook and join our group, the Land Profit Generator Real Estate Investing Group. But in the meantime, what we did last week, I talked about a situation where we have a student of ours is doing three different deals. One of them is a deal with where we go to a title company. One is a deal where we're doing a seller financing deal, and one is a deal where it's a small deal where we're doing the deal without a title company, and where we're doing a deal even without, just a self-closing as we call it. So self-closing is an option that you can do. By the way, if you're chiming in, if you're watching this, make sure if you're watching this live right now, make sure you put in your name, telling where you're from, and if you're watching this on any other platform afterwards, make sure you also put in comments and things like that. So with that said, so when you do a title, when you buy a property, obviously usually you go to a title company. The title company does the following steps. The first thing a title company does is submit that property, that legal description of the property, the parcel number, the name of the owner, anything to their research department or to their title department and title search department, and they're doing what's called a title search. Now in a title search, what you do, you got to shift your gears, because everything so far that you've been typically doing with real estate, it's all about the property. It's all about the property. So it's like you're rehabbing a property. We're dealing with land. You're putting the property on 123 Main Street under contract. You're putting the property described by this parcel number under contract. Right? You're putting the property described by XYZ legal description under contract. And then you're selling that property again. But the process here in between that we now need to master is, if you're doing the title search, you're actually only looking for the property as a secondary item. What you're actually looking for is for the owner of the property. So title search is not looking for the property. The results will bring you everything off the property. But when you do your own title search, what you effectively are doing is you're searching for anything that has been recorded against that property. I think this is pretty wide angle here because I still see my chair over here. So there we go. So anything that has been recorded against that owner of that property. Because you got to think, if you back up a little bit, there's a big misconception in the world going on about what you do in how real estate works. And when you buy a piece of real estate and you get a mortgage, you basically say, I mortgage that piece of property. However, the mortgage or a deed of trust or a loan against the property is actually not a loan against the property. What it is a personal loan that you take, right? It's a personal loan that you take where you use the home, the house, or the land as a collateral. So basically you sign as the borrower on the dotted line. You put your John Hancock there, and because of that, with that, you take personal responsibility for that loan. That's why if you don't pay that loan, they can harm your credit. That's why if you don't pay that loan, people can go after you and have recourse against you, right? But because you personally signed that loan, you took that loan. The bank was just willing to give you that loan because you had an asset that they can put a lien against, and that lien gives the bank the right to take that property away from you if you if you don't follow your obligations, if you don't pay the loan. So therefore, when you do a title search, what you want to do is you want to go search for that person to see what is that person, what has that person signed, and what liens that does that person who owns the property have. And then you got to look at lien after lien after lien to see if any of those liens affect that property. So let's look at that. So so I always, when I explain it, I always use the example of you start out with Jim Beam, right? So Jim Beam owns the property. You're buying the property from Jim Beam. So Jim Beam is the owner of the property for the last 20 years, and you're buying the lot from him. Great. So now what you do is you go on the county records, and obviously a title company does that for you, or an abstractor does it for you. But you go on the county website and go to the recorder's office, or the clerk office, often called, and you type in Jim Beam, and you press enter. Now, if you're lucky, there's only a couple of Jim Beams around there. If you're bad luck and it's not Jim Beam but John Smith, and there might be 100 of them there, so you literally would have to go to one record of these 100 after another. If you're lucky and the seller's name is John Mitzerilski, then there's probably only going to be one John Mitzerilski, because nobody knows how to spell it anyway, and there's not many Mitzerilskis in the world. So therefore, but let's say Jim Beam, there's only 2 of them out there. But there's like 10 records out there. So there's 10 different things that Jim Beam signed up for that or were recorded in the county with Jim Beam being associated to. So associated with. So what you do next is you click on the first one and you pull up the document. Now outside of California, in most states, you can actually go and pull up the recorded documents without any problems. In California, there's usually privacy laws. You can't pull it up. So you actually might have to physically do that out in the county, or you have to go to a third-party data service, or perhaps your title company allows you access to their records themselves that you can search through there too. But outside of California, you can do this. You can pull up the records right there. It might have a watermark over it that says unofficial copy or something like that, but you can still read what it's all about. So now you go in and you search for Jim Beam and you find there's 8 records. You open the first one. The first one, let's say it's a warranty deed. A warranty deed where Jim Beam bought a property. So at that moment you look at that, what property is it? Is this the warranty deed where he bought the property that he's about to sell to me? Or is this a warranty deed where he bought something else? And you look at it and you see, oh, it's a property deed to a house that's somewhere else in the county. It's probably where he lives, right? Okay, great. So that's his warranty deed, good. Then the next document pull up, it's a note. It's a mortgage, right? It's a note, a deed of trust. A deed of trust and note. It's like, okay, what property is that for? When you look at it, it's like, oh, that doesn't affect the piece of land either, because it's the mortgage against the house that we just found the deed for. The next document now is a release of a deed of trust, a release of a note. And you see that, and it's like, oh, okay, which one is that for? You see, okay, that's for the same house. So it means like he bought a house, he had to take a mortgage on it, he paid off the mortgage, and now he owns the property free and clear. The next one is now, what is that? The next one is like, okay, it's another warranty deed. It's for what? Oh, that's the warranty deed. You look at the legal description, you compare it to the legal description of your of the property that you're buying. It's like, okay, that's the warranty deed that proves that he is the owner. Well, let's look at that. Let's see how he owns it. So you pull that document up, and you see that he owns it as Jim Beam, as a single man, as a single man. Okay, great. So now, one of the questions you ask Mr. Beam next time, Jim Beam, when you call him, is like, hey, Mr. Beam, have you since you bought this property, have you married? Because if he is married since he bought the property, in that case, you actually need to get, when you purchase, you need to get the spouse to also sign the deed, or have the spouse sign what's called an interspousal disclaimer deed, so where the spouse disclaims and basically gives up any right possibly in the property. Because if that property is one of the Western states, it's community property, which means that automatically when Jim Beam married Susie Beam, when they got married, and if she contributed in some shape or form to the finances of the family, she could potentially have that finances were used to potentially pay off a loan on the property. She could potentially have rights, or even if they were used to pay the property taxes, she could potentially own 50% of that property, even though she is not on the records. So therefore, now what you need to do is you need to know that. So therefore, you will look at that in detail. If we see that it's Jim and Susie Beam as joint tenants with right of survivorship, then next time we call Mr. Beam, we say like, hey, Mr. Beam, just want to make sure, is your spouse Susie available to sign the deed too? Well, if she's not, then we need to get a death certificate of the spouse in order to remove her from the deed, because joint tenants with right of survivorship, if you have a death certificate filed, you automatically now, the surviving person owns 100% of the property. There's no probate necessary, right? So then he can sell it to you. So there's all these kind of little title issues that you keep in mind as you go through that. But then you keep going through that. And now, for example, what you find is you find another mortgage, or you find another deed of trust. This one was actually set against the land. And you're like, okay, so this is so apparently when Jim Beam bought it, he perhaps bought it for $30,000, and he put $5,000 down, and he had a $25,000 note against it, a deed of trust, a mortgage against it, right? And now he has paid this thing off. So now is the question: has he truly paid it off? Well, this answer to that comes hopefully in the other remaining documents. Because if you now have like 3 or 4 documents remaining, you pull them up, you look at that, and it's like, oh, now once is for another property that he owns since then. The another one is another mortgage, another prepayment, another release. And so all for other properties, nothing affects this piece of land that we have over here under contract with him. And then you'll open the last document, and it's also not pertaining to the land. In this case, you have the following situation. Jim Beam bought the property from whoever he bought it from. He then took a bank loan against it, or some kind of a loan against it, for $25,000, and there's no evidence in the records at all that he paid off this $25,000. So what happens now? Well, you got to call Jim Beam. It's just like, hey, Mr. Beam, hey Jim, here's the following situation. We want to buy this property from you, but it states that you still owe money on it. It's like, and then one of two things happened. He's going to say, well, yeah, I still owe like $5,000 on it, but I thought it's going to be paid off to the closing because you offered me $12,000 for the property. It's like, okay, sounds good, all good. Just want to make sure that this still is legit and this money is still being owed. Or in that case, the title company. In that case, you might want to give it to the title company because it needs to be paid off in the process of closing escrow. Or what you do is you can call that lender yourself and you say like, hey, I need a payoff amount. He's like, yeah, it's $5,312. Okay, great. And then you send him a check out of closing once you have the deed, and once it's all set, you have a deed. You send it to closing. But ideally, as soon as it gets into that kind of stuff, you want to use a title company for it, so they do all these things for you. Then the next thing is, or the answer is like Mr. Beam says, Jim Beam says like, oh no, I paid this thing off a long time ago. Was like, well, have you gotten a release? Was like, well, I don't know. Let me look at my records. So you look in your records, he finds the release, he sends it over to you, and then you send it in for recording, and that closes the loop again. So a lien is only an open lien if it hasn't been removed already. And the way to remove a outstanding mortgage is by by recording a release of the lien, the release of the mortgage. Now, that's the typical case. You find those, or they find it. Now, if they don't find it, you can contact the lender, and the lender typically gives you a release if it's an honest and proper lender. Now, we've had a case where one of our students has a deal under contract, and the sellers could swear to God, and they will swear to God, and they're the most reliable people, former medical doctor, retiree. He's like, nothing but proper. He's like, I know for a fact I paid this off, but I don't have any records. And now we reached out to it was the title company in this case reached out to the lender, and the lender says like, well, prove to us that it was been paid off, otherwise you still owe us the full amount because we have no proof. So the lender is a private person, complete assholes, and they're forcing them to basically pay that full dollar amount off again, which is actually more than what our student offered for the property. So it really killed the deal in the process. That happens too, but that rarely happens. Usually the lenders are honest and they're reputable and normal people, and they actually say like, yep, they paid it off. Here, I'll issue a new release. It's not a problem. Right. So that's one of the ways you do that. Now, what if you find a release? What if you find like a mechanic's lien or something like that, that somebody did some work and didn't get paid? Well, it depends. You got to look up in the state counties and the state statutes to see how fast the mechanic's liens expire and things like that. But typically, if you find an open lien, you got to reach out to your seller and discuss that with them and say like, okay, what is the story here? What do we do about this? And either mostly the seller will have a release to it, or you will be able to get a release to it. Or if there's not release, what you sometimes find is that the county recorded something like a whole bunch of violations, and then these violations add up to a lot of money. So you can go to the county and you can talk to them and negotiate that down. You can also go to private people and negotiate those liens down, because they haven't been paid on those liens for probably 10, 15 years. So they're like, well, if I can get something, that's better than nothing. In their mind, they've written off those liens already. So you can typically negotiate a lower payoff for the liens, and that makes still the deal often happen and makes the deal profitable again. Right? So that's basically it. So what you do is you do a title search, you find these liens, and as soon as you find a lien, you're going to keep searching until you find the release of the lien. And if the lien has not been released, then you got to call your seller and you got to talk to your seller and say like, hey, I found this lien, it's not released, what's the story? And then you go from there. When do we do these deals without using title companies? When do we do our own title searches? Well, we do those when there's not enough money in the deal left to warrant the expense of a title company. And that's typically with those lower end deals. Those deals that are they're like $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 in value. Let's say you have it like one of our students has a deal like that. It's a value of $5,000, $6,000. He has it under contract for $1,000 or $900, right? $900 is a great deal, or 7 to 9. It has two deals. One is for $700, one for $900. So, but they're all both worth more to $5,000. Let's say $5,000 each. So if you think about it, in some states, title companies are very expensive. In this particular case, the title company in that area is costs about $2,000 to close on that title, $2,000 to $2,500 to do a deal there, right? That was so when you do that kind of a deal, then there's no money left. You can't pay the seller $1,000, pay the title company $2,000, and then you owe, and then you sell it for $4,000, for $5,000, and then you potentially have to cover some of the title closing costs on the selling side, and you're making basically $1,000 on that deal. That's not worth anyone's time. But if you do, in this case, if you do the title search yourself, you come out with a result that it's a clean title. So Jim Beam bought this property from Johnny Walker, and in Jim Beam's history there's a mortgage, the mortgage is paid off, and nothing else is in the records about this property, then it's a clean purchase. In that case, what you basically go back, you then go and check out the next person back in the chain of title. The next person behind it is now Johnny Walker. So you check out Johnny Walker, and you see Johnny Walker also owned it for 20 years. Johnny Walker bought it from, guess what? Who is the next one in the chain? Come give me some names here, guys. But if Jim Beam started Johnny Walker, then the third one is, well, obviously it's going to be, I don't know, John Woodbridge or something like that, right? What is that? Jim Beam, Johnny Walker, and which is the third big chain of whiskey? I actually forgot it right now. It doesn't matter. But let's say John Woodbridge. So Woodbridge Bourbon, obviously, it's a good brand. So like John Woodbridge is the third one. But here's the thing. The moment you got back to about 40 years back, you can stop with your search. Because even title companies don't care what happened 60, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. They care about what happened like about 35, 40 years ago. So if you look at Jim Beam, bought it 20 years ago from Johnny Walker. Jim Beam's ownership is clean. He bought it, he had a mortgage, the mortgage was paid off. Right? You found the lien, you found the release of the lien. All is recorded property. Then you should look at for Johnny Walker. You find that Johnny Walker bought the property 20 years prior from John Woodbridge, and Johnny Walker had bought it cash. So there's no lien, no mortgage, no other liens recorded against that property. Then you're ready to go. Now all you need to do is draw up a deed, send it to the seller, have the seller sign it, have the seller back, you send him the money. It's all good, and you just bought this property without title insurance, without involving a title company, costing you only perhaps a couple of $100 in the cost of perhaps a mobile notary, some FedEx cost, and little things like that. So now you bought this property for $900. With the $200 of closing costs, you're in it for $1,100. You now sell this property, let's say we sell a financing for $5,000 or even for cash for $5,000. Guess what? You receive a $5,000 payment, you draw up a new deed, which is the same deed that before, you just change the grantor and grantee, the buyer and the seller, and then you sent that for recording, and now you passed the ownership of the property on to the new buyer, and you made how much money? You sell it for $5,000, perhaps you even charge a $500 closing fee, so for $5,500 you sold the property, your cost was $1,100, you now made $4,400 on that property, and that's a profit that's definitely worth doing that little bit of effort in that process. Now, the easy way to do this, by the way, guys, is for you not to do the title search yourself. But if you want to, usually in our coaching program, students eventually come to the point that they come across deals like that, and then our master coaches help our students through that process of actually getting these deals done and helping them to the self-closing process, because pretty much every one of our master coaches have gone to the process of doing a self-closing themselves already. In many cases, most of them have done a ton of those self-closing. One of our coaches does 300 plus deals, and they does all of them self-closing. So we have the expertise about all the self-closing in-house. So when you work with us in coaching, you can actually, we have a power group of coaches there that can walk you through all the details of exactly how that works. And with that said, okay, bye-bye everyone. Have a great day.
Enjoyed this episode? Then make sure you like, subscribe, and post your comments and questions below the video. We're looking forward to hearing from you.